are these people?
This port, Collin, in Gaza. Do you hear about this? This
Yes.
is at the State of the Union, right? The Joe Biden, right? This asshat said this.
The United States has been leading international efforts to get more humanitarian assistance to Gaza.
The United States besides Gaza. Okay?
Tonight, I'm directing the U.S. military to lead an emergency mission to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean on the coast of Gaza that can receive large shipments carrying food, water, medicine, and temporary shelters. No U.S. boots will be on the ground. A temporary pier will enable a massive increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza every day.
It's the only way.
And Israel must do its part.
To pay for it.
Israel must allow more aid into Gaza to ensure humanitarian workers aren't caught in the crossfire. You know the thing.
The idea of ceasefire and humanitarian aid have been co-opted.
Yep. Yeah. And partially because we've been demanding it. That's the only reason why.
Partially because right, but here's the problem though. Like, I've said this, I'm all for the ceasefire, but that's not the in of itself going to solve the problem.
No, we've covered that.
The issue that I have with is Zionism. That's what needs to be called out. That is what
give Palestinians their country back and let them have a free place to live, like, you know, so that they're not going to die. Like it's a ceasefire involves that, you know, there might start shooting again at some point. Like, so yeah, it's not great. But speaking of aid being co-opted, Jake Johnson over there at Common Dreams writes, starving children in Gaza cannot wait weeks for U.S. port, aid group says. They are already dying from malnutrition. Saving their lives is a matter of hours or days. And Jason Lee of Save the Children. So, a leading humanitarian group said Friday that starving people in Gaza, including more than 1 million children, are in need of immediate aid and can't afford to wait for the U.S. military to construct a port on the enclave's coast, a project that expected to take weeks. Children in Gaza cannot wait to eat, said Jason Lee, country director for Save the Children in the occupied Palestinian territory. They are already dying from malnutrition, and saving their lives is a matter of hours or days. At least 17 children have starved to death in Gaza, according to Defense for Children International. I'm sure that's a conservative number. Palestine and many more are currently struggling to survive. Condemning Israel's obstruction of ground-based aid deliveries as a grave violation against children and international law, Lee stressed Friday that there is already a tried and tested system in place to effectively coordinate aid that they're stopping, Collin.
Right.
Okay. But trucks of food and medicine that could save lives are waiting at crossings while children are starving just miles away while Israelis are raving near those trucks. Right? Isn't that what's happening? Lee continued, airdrops with no on-the-ground coordination of who it reaches and maritime corridors like the one announced yesterday are no solutions to keep children alive. Neither are substitutes for unimpeded humanitarian assistance via the established land routes. Right?
And I'm not sure if Drake mentions this, but just kind of doing some like stuff online, the airdrops, you know, that happened, I think, over a week ago. Number one, extremely expensive.
Yeah.
Big thing. Expensive. Number two, they killed people. Well, actually, like the actual act of them dropping it. And then number three, expired. Right. A lot of it was expired. And then number four, when Palestinians tried to get the food en masse, the IDF shoots them.
Well, same thing with the trucks, right? The trucks came in and they were literally used as like salt licks for humans.
Right. So the idea that Biden is building, I mean, this is kind of typical of the US to spend way too much money for shit results, basically. So It's on par the course for us. But, the idea that they're willing to build this port, which again is going to take weeks versus actually doing like strategic ground deliveries, which is cheaper and much more effective at providing that the IDF doesn't do shit. It kind of just leads to the asinine way that we're trying to make try to make do with people like in the belief, oh, we're actually trying to do something when they're really not. And shout out to Chris Legion, friend in the network, who said they use the aid as bait. Yeah. Yep. As bait, but also as a way to try to appease us to think that something is actually happening.
Yeah. Yeah, which is, and we're going to get to what it's really about here in a minute, but U.S. President Joseph Biden announced during his State of the Union address Thursday night that he has directed the nation's military to lead an emergency mission to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean on the coast of Gaza, right? The president also said Israel, whose military is armed to the teeth with U.S. weaponry, must do its part by allowing more aid into Gaza, but did not threaten any consequences if the Netanyahu government refuses. Israel needs to facilitate rather than block the flow of supplies. This is not a logistics problem. It is a political problem. Ground deliveries in Gaza have plummeted in recent weeks as Israeli forces have attacked aid convoys and prevented trucks from entering and moving through the territory. A World Food Program WFP official said earlier this week there's enough food to feed Gaza's entire population sitting just outside of the Strip. We need land crossings. We need access to get into Gaza, whether in the southern parts of Gaza or the northern part of Gaza, because the situation is catastrophic. So having access is really our number one priority, said Samir Abel-Jabir, WFP's director of emergency. The WFP has said airdropped, which Biden authorized last week, are a last resort and will not avert famine. On Friday, aid packages dropped into Gaza by U.S. military planes killed 5 people and injured at least 10 others. Right. Avril Benoit, executive director for Doctors Without Borders, argued Friday that Biden's plan for a temporary port is a glaring distraction from the real problem: Israel's indiscriminate and disproportionate military campaign and punishing siege, aka a genocide. The food, water, and medical supplies so desperately needed by people in Gaza are sitting just across the border, said Benoit. Israel needs to facilitate rather than block the flow of supplies. This is not a logistics problem, it's a political problem. Rather than look to the U.S. military to build a workaround, the U.S. should insist on immediate humanitarian access using the roads and entry points that already exist. Refugees International said in a report released Thursday that its research teams found Israel is engaged in routine and arbitrary denial of legitimate humanitarian goods from entering Gaza, forcing aid convoys to undergo a highly complicated inspection process without clear or consistent instructions. Our research makes clear that the conditions inside of Gaza are apocalyptic, the group said. After 5 months of war, Palestinians are struggling to find adequate food, water, shelter, and basic medicine. Famine-level hunger is already widespread and worsening. Matt Duss, Executive Vice President of the Center of International Policy and a former foreign policy advisor to none other than U.S. Senator and cuck Bernie Sanders, wrote Friday that while more aid for Palestinians on the brink of starvation is obviously good, the Biden administration's airdrops and plan for a temporary port underscore the incoherence of U.S. policy right now, in which we're trying to ease Palestinian suffering while continuing to unconditionally arm and support the government that is intentionally inflicting that suffering. The president seems to recognize that ultimately this conflict will require a political solution, but is still unwilling to bring the full weight of America's considerable leverage to that goal, wrote Duss, aka he knows it'll affect his election, but doesn't give a shit about the actual people. So that's what that sounds like to me. Has to give lip service, but in action, reminds me of another quote. There's a private policy and a public policy. Sound about right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, temporary port in Gaza. Reef Breland, does this sound like the beginning of that Ben Gurion Canal to you? That sounds like exactly what that is. So, yeah. I wonder when we see the location, if it lines up with where they propose that canal. We'll see. Mint Press. U.S. to send 1,000 soldiers to build important Gaza next to gas reserves. Right? The Department of Defense is sending 1,000 soldiers from the U.S. Army's 7th Expeditionary Transportation Brigade to construct a temporary floating pier, end quote, to be anchored off the coast of Gaza. The purported aim is to bring aid to the Strip, but many are questioning if there is a connection to the attended gas extraction in the area.
Yes.
Uh-huh. So, MJ Salam, in my experience in the Navy, and to this date, there has never been a temporary port built and then removed.
Right. It's again, this is expensive, even though it's temporary. Like, you're not going to build an expensive thing like that with the idea of removing it later. No.
They will be building a permanent port, a military base, and a facility to support oil and gas drilling. If they truly wanted to get aid shipments to Gaza, just let the 100 of trucks at the border in. This operation is to steal Gaza's resources. So it's also not a great look when you first set off for this 4-hour cruise. You play the fucking Imperial March. Like you're gonna go build a fucking Death Star. What?
Right. I think that just went over their heads, but like, still yeah. I
can't even. No one thought, hey, don't do that. Hey, don't. That's gonna be bad look. Here they are, Care Bear. This is all the stuff they're bringing in to build this, right? Do you think all that is there to make something temporary?
Nope.
I mean, and who's making money off that endeavor right there? Who are we paying for that? So
we are.
Hotspot is here to remind us the Gaza Marine, Gaza's untapped natural gas field. Make no mistake, this is what Biden's temporary port to deliver aid to Gaza is actually about.
Take a look at this. 20 miles off the coast of the Gaza Strip, there's an untapped natural gas field called the Gaza Marine. This field holds an estimated trillion cubic feet of natural gas, and the U.S. wants to develop it. Amos Hochstein, Biden's energy security advisor, referred to this as an economic revitalization plan for a post-war Gaza Strip, stating that there are companies willing to develop those fields. The United States has a contentious history with foreign resources. During the Iraq War, the U.S. opened the country's fully nationalized oil industry. Today, Iraq is dominated by privatized foreign firms. Remember to follow for more updates.
Yeah. I mean, par for the course, no?
Take a look at this.
Par for the course.
So, guess who's going? Come on. Thank you. World Central Kitchen, the organization founded by the chef Jose Andres, is central to the U.S.'s aid plan in Gaza. So, yeah, Jose Andres being a dickhead, as he has been frequently recently. I think he did Ukraine stuff too, if I'm not mistaken. Diplomatic source to take post Gaza maritime route was Netanyahu's idea, Collin. This is an exclusive to the Jerusalem Post. So Israel admits Biden's Gaza seaport has been Netanyahu's idea all along, and it's part of Israel's plan to dismantle and replace UNRWA, as well as permanently cut Gaza off from Israel, the West Bank, and the world, and contain international outrage against Israel's war and starvation of Gaza. Right? So look here. Is the replacement of UNRWA. The trucks with the food on them will be transported to distribution points in Gaza. The political source said that there is no guarantee that Hamas will not try to take over the trucks, as happened in the past, but they are determined to prevent this. The political official explained that through the opening of the cruise line, Israel hopes to achieve several goals. The first, the replacement of UNRWA by another organization that will be responsible for the distribution of food. Is because they're claiming UNRWA is Hamas now, right?
Yes.
So a third reason is the reduction of international pressure on Israel as the one that supposedly withholds foods from the residents of Gaza and even starves them, as claimed by the world. Right? So this is the narrative they're trying to manage, literally written in ink for you to read. Compton J, friend of the show. The plan for a maritime route to Gaza via Cyprus to provide humanitarian assistance for Palestinians was initiated by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in collaboration with Joe Biden, a senior diplomatic source told the Jerusalem Post, right? Netanyahu.
Oh wait, pause. I thought Joe Biden was trying to push Bibi to do the right thing, man.
I mean, maybe.
I thought Biden was calling Bibi. I'm not going to say the words, but basically, I forget exactly what word he said, but basically everything but a child of God.
Don't lie on the public platform.
You know?
I mean, I didn't. Biden did.
No, yes. Netanyahu took the initiative to establish maritime humanitarian aid for the civilian population in the Gaza Strip in collaboration with the Biden admin, the source stated. According to the source, on October 22nd, 2 weeks following the war's outbreak, Netanyahu discussed with Biden the concept of delivering humanitarian aid to Gaza via the sea, contingent on an Israeli inspection in Cyprus. So it's got to go to Cyprus, and then it goes into Gaza, right?
Watch it not leave Cyprus at all.
Sure, but it's, I mean, even if it's, we know what that other temporary port's going to be used for anyway, so...
right.
CJ continues. Then on October 31st, Prime Minister Netanyahu outlined this strategy to Cypriot President Nikos Christodoulides. The source added,
Yes.
Christodoulides, I think. Christodoulides.
I guess.
The source added, in addition, the matter was revisited on January 19th during a dialogue between Netanyahu and Biden, where Netanyahu proposed, according to the source, I want to suggest setting up a team to explore maritime supply through Cyprus after a thorough inspection of all goods. This source, close to the PM, insinuated that Biden was simply implementing a plan for Netanyahu, not actually initiating anything new. The source spoke with the Jerusalem Post at the time of the heightened diplomatic tensions between Biden and Netanyahu, as the U.S. president has sought to distance himself from the prime minister as part of the 2024 re-election campaign. Remember, we were talking about that earlier? Biden made headlines at his State of the Union address to Congress last Thursday when he announced that the U.S. military planned to build an emergency temporary port off the Gaza coastline to help facilitate the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza. He made the statement in light of the hunger crisis in Gaza and to underscore the U.S. commitment to helping the Palestinian people during Israel's military campaign to destroy Hamas. The move was also viewed as a criticism of Netanyahu by the United States, when Biden stating in a speech on Thursday that Israel could and should do more to help Palestinians in Gaza. Years before the Gaza war, Israel Katz, now the foreign minister, had drawn up plans for a maritime route via Cyprus involving a floating island. The project was never executed, but he revived it after the war began on October 7th. One of the complicating factors with a maritime route was the absence of a port in Gaza big enough to handle cargo ships. Why might they need a port for cargo ships in Gaza, Care Bear?
I don't know, Reef.
That must be one of Ben Gurion's ideas. 150 nukes across the country to build a canal. Something like that. Israel has welcomed Biden's announcement of a military operation to build a temporary port. Now, why would they do that, Collin? Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, together with the Navy commander, the head of GOGAT, military secretary and commander of the Navy's Ashot Arena, were briefed Sunday on the work needed to establish a naval pier and routes that will enable the distribution of aid to civilians. So he's the one, like, here's what we got to do, right? Like, that's the guy they're going to. So Dan Cohen writes, I first reported on Israel's plan to build an island seaport in 2015 when Israel Katz, now Israel's foreign minister, proposed it. Now Biden has adopted Katz's plan so they can pillage Gaza's gas resources as they exterminate the Palestinian population, right? So Dan Cohen doing the work again. But yeah, thoughts, Scare Bear?
I mean, not surprised. I mean, we said it. We said this months ago. You know, like with the Ben Gurion Canal, like I mean, obviously at that time, other than the gas beds off the coast, you know, we couldn't necessarily not prove, but we weren't entirely sure back then. This was about 3 months ago, that how this was going to come to light. And it seems now they have found the way for that to happen. So, but again, if this is what makes Biden and the Democratic Party especially devious, that they're using the idea of military aid / a ceasefire, that's just a cover. Is really meant to kind of bring this along and bring plans of the Ben Gurion Canal, assuming this to be true, which, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Why would you spend more money to build a floating dock, a temporary one at that? That's not temporary. That's an investment.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're not going to spend that kind of money on things if they don't intend to get something out of it in return.
Yeah.
So, but the idea that Biden is using ceasefire / humanitarian aid in the guise of helping the Palestinians, when it's really just to profit, well, I wouldn't say him, but to profit like the lobby's pockets, I would say.
Yeah.
And the fact that people are not necessarily catching that is kind of sad. Like, I mean, not to mentioned on Twitter,
they had places like airports and piers and stuff already before Israel decided to start carpet bombing them. So, you know, it's just not addressing the root causes of any of this, you know. So, and you're already seeing Hollywood and other places try to give their lip service to this so that they can, you know, well, I'm sure many of them will tell us that Biden is trying to do everything he can to help this out. So, you
know what? I said this today, but you know, I've been, you know, at the Oscars.
Yeah.
Like there's some celebrities who are wearing those ceasefire pins or whatever. And I know there are a few people in the space that are like, that's a great thing. And I've been kind of mixed on that. And I wasn't exactly sure why up until today when I really thought about it. And I think, shout out to Savvy, I think she made a good point on this when I listened to one of her clips. I think it might have been today or yesterday. But I kind of thought about this too. She mentioned this for another reason, but I was thinking about it in terms of those stupid pins. Like the celebrities that are wearing those pins, that's for the fans because many of their fans are young. Many of the fans they know would be pro-Palestine, so they can wear the pin. They're not going to say genocide. they're not going to necessarily say ceasefire now or whatever, but
some
they'll wear these pins as some might. I mean, some have, but I think that like in Hollywood, you're not going to have people who are going to be willing to lose their careers over saying genocide.
Yeah.
You know,
meanwhile,
especially given
DJ Khaled is still an asshat.
Yes.
You know, but
I think in a way, his silence, I kind of prefer, because that speaks volumes more to me, because him being silent, we know where he stands.
Yeah.
You know, but the idea that you would silently put on a pin and say ceasefire in that vein,
but
liberation, you're not willing
or...
to, right. Yeah. You're not willing to say liberation. You're not willing to say genocide. And
maybe you are.
You're not willing.
You know,
yeah, but not
prove me wrong.
Right, but I'm saying, but not celebrities though.
Yeah,
not many of. I'll argue most of them.
Well, it's
so
like the squad. The squad has now picked up ceasefire too, right? Even though they're willing to do nothing.
And even
for
AOC wore a Palestinian pin at the State of the Union, I believe.
Yeah.
Whereas
months and months.
I think it was like Tlaib and Bush wear cafe like at the State of the Union in protests, I would argue. But again, none of them are willing to say genocide. None of them are willing, as you said, to say liberation. They're all doing it because that's what people are pushing them to say, but not necessarily take the necessary actions to make a ceasefire happen. But more importantly, again, as I said earlier, ceasefire in of itself, that's the floor.
Yeah.
Like what we really need to be talking about is Zionism and how it is essentially hijacked religion and for Jews their culture to justify their experience, especially what happened to the Holocaust, as a cover. And this is what Jonathan Glazer, who won that Oscar, was mentioning a Sunday night, and people were up in arms over him.
Yeah.
Like, you're using your pain as a shield to inflict pain on other people. And I know for me, you know, I just think about this. If this were within the Black community, if we were doing shit like that, we wouldn't hear the end of it.
Yeah.
But again, I speak to the exceptionalism, and I'm not saying for all Jews. I'm just saying for the Zionists who are, and I have to be careful because not all Jews are Zionists. So I do have to be careful on that. But so I want to make that clarification. But it's just this belief that we can do whatever we want. We can take over whatever we want, and you can't stop us. And again, and I probably will mention this more, like I'm talking with Indy. I've talked to Indy about this quite a bit. But like as a Black person, I kind of feel a way about it, because when we talk about issues regarding reparations, which we also have talked about on the show, you know, people even in our community basically say kick rocks. We're not going to talk about reparations, anything regarding Black people. We don't care. Shut the fuck up. Yep. You know, but you expect me to feel bad for you regarding the Holocaust, but yet you feel, but at the cost of Palestinians, that you're going to essentially ethnically cleanse them off the land and displace them. I have a huge problem with that.
Me too.
And it makes me feel a way that that's where we're at right now.
Yep.
In terms of, I have to, you know, feel sympathy for you in terms of your history, but you're not willing to feel sympathy for me in terms of mine.
Yep. Well, I think that's it. You know, look out for the location of this pier and see if it lines up with that Ben Gurion project. But you know,
I mean, honestly, it really doesn't matter as long as it's on the sea.
Close enough, yeah.
like, it really doesn't matter where it is. So, but you know, but I don't know. It's it just sucks that like we're at this impasse in thought that as a Black person, our feelings are ignored, our needs are ignored. But like, again, going with TikTok, you know, like, you know, some people are mentioning that just now, you know, we're able to pass that bill within days. Well, really months, but days.
Yep.
But we can't talk about reparations. We can't talk about police reform,
healthcare, none of that. You know, Chris
healthcare, like healthcare, like homelessness, like
Chris in the chat said your point about how fast they passed the TikTok bill was on point, Collin. Yeah, they're more than willing to call for censorship very quickly.
Right. Like, but so this just kind of proves, and you know what, Jamal Bowman, like, I mean, we did a segment on this a couple of years ago when he spoke at my event that with Empower Ed. He mentioned like we can do anything in Congress.
Yeah.
So this just kind of proves his point. Like anything can be done if they have the means and the will to do it.
Yeah. Well,
but they're just not willing to do it for us. They're willing to do it for their donors and their lobby friends.
Yep.
Because that's what makes them the money.
And what that's they're really mad about them. Is that we've been talking about that kind of stuff on places like TikTok, on, you know, this channel here multiple times, which is why we're censored and demonetized, which if you want to help us out, you know, in financial ways, you could go to ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, you know, or you can scan that QR code on your screen now, or if you're in the chat, you can put !donate. And if you don't want to give financially, this stuff is very useful. Like and subscribing, sharing these streams and videos, leaving comments. We're trying to get to 2K subscribers. We're getting there. So, you know, appreciate you if you're already subbed.